Lewis Hamilton just crashed in FP 3 minutes later. Ferrari dropped a bombshell report confirming the worst-case scenario. The car wasn't just damaged, it was fundamentally unstable. Floor destroyed, rear balance broken, and no setup data ahead of qualifying. He got knocked out in Q1, and now faces starting 16th with a car Ferrari themselves say could be structurally compromised. Subscribe now because this isn't just bad luck. It's the complete collapse of Hamilton's final weekend in red, and the race hasn't even started. Lewis Hamilton's final race weekend with Ferrari was meant to be a moment of closure, a final chance to extract something positive from a season plagued by disappointment. Instead, it turned into chaos the moment he lost control in turn 14 during FP3. His SF-25 stepped out under braking, rotated aggressively, and slammed into the barriers nose first, then rear. The session was red flagged immediately, but was what came after that sent shockwaves through the paddock. Within the hour, Ferrari published an internal technical bulletin outlining the full extent of the damage. The crash didn't just destroy visible parts like the front wing and suspension, it compromised structural elements of the floor and possibly deformed the lower chassis mounting points. That type of damage goes beyond what could be fixed trackside in a matter of hours. The team was forced to replace the entire floor assembly, rear wishbone structure, and parts of the cooling system, all with no guarantee the rebuild would match the original aerodynamic behavior. The most alarming part of the report was the phrase, loss of aero correlation. That means the new components fitted on Hamilton's car hadn't been tested with the exact same chassis setup, and there was no data confirming how the car would respond. In a car like the SF-25, where performance depends on millimetric ride height and aero balance, this is catastrophic. Ferrari engineers admitted in private briefings that they were effectively working blind going into qualifying. The car was legal but completely unverified. Without FP3 running, Hamilton had no chance to feel how the car behaved with the backup floor or new suspension layout. Ferrari couldn't run simulations fast enough to provide him with updated diff, brake, or energy deployment settings. So when he rolled out in Q1, he was driving an untested machine on cold tires against some of the tightest midfield competition of the season. Every other driver had completed their planned prep. Hamilton had none of that, just instinct and a compromised car. The first flying lap was already filled with warnings. The rear of the SF-25 stepped out on exit of turn 7, and Hamilton had to catch two oversteer moments before finishing the sector. The balance was inconsistent, sometimes rotating too quickly, sometimes refusing to turn at all. On the radio, his voice was tense. "I've got nothing at the rear." The team gave no setup instructions, just silence. They were just as uncertain as he was. This wasn't Formula One at the limit, it was damage control. The result was the third Q1 elimination in a row for Hamilton, something that would have been unthinkable at the start of the season. He missed the cut by less than a tenth of a second, but the real story wasn't the gap, it was the fact that Ferrari admitted post-session that they still didn't know whether the floor was aerodynamically stable. That statement alone confirmed what many had feared. Hamilton wasn't driving a racing car. He was wrestling with an unknown variable held together by guesswork and time pressure. Heading into Sunday, the problems don't go away, they get worse. Ferrari's race engineers revealed that Hamilton's tire degradation model is inaccurate due to the lack of long-run data. The new rear suspension could behave unpredictably over stint. Fuel burn-off, brake temperatures, aero balance on full tanks, all of it is a mystery. Ferrari has dropped a bombshell, and Hamilton now enters his final race with the team sitting P16, in car they can't fully trust, hoping for a miracle to avoid a disastrous send-off. Hamilton's Q1 performance wasn't just underwhelming, it was technically revealing. When the lap traces were compared post-session, it became clear that the SF-25's instability was costing him time in every critical area. In Sector 1, where precision through the tight sequence of turns 1 to 3 is essential, Hamilton was already a tenth off the pace. His minimum corner speeds were lower, particularly in turn 2, where the rear of the car stepped out mid-corner, forcing a correction that compromised his exit into the straight. Sector 2 exposed the true scale of the issue. Ferrari's data revealed that Hamilton lost over 2/10 alone through turns 5 to 7, where traction and balance are everything. The crash-rebuilt SF-25 showed unpredictable rotation, with the car initially understeering into the apex before suddenly over-rotating on exit. That behavior suggests poor correlation between the floor's aero load and the new suspension geometry, a mismatch Ferrari engineers later described as structurally unstable under lateral load, meaning the car couldn't maintain aerodynamic consistency during high-speed direction changes. Where most alarming was Sector 3, where Hamilton's time loss was both visual and mechanical. Coming out of turn 17 and into the final chicane, the rear simply refused to stay planted. He had to lift mid-corner twice, something that destroys lap momentum at Yas Marina. Compared to Leclerc, who carried nearly 8 km/h more speed through the same section, Hamilton's car appeared to be sliding rather than gripping. Ferrari later confirmed that the new floor showed a drag penalty on the straights, likely due to emergency fit panels disrupting airflow under the car. Looking at the raw lap time, Hamilton clocked a 1 minute 24.4, just 0.088 seconds shy of Q2. But raw time only tells part of the story. Leclerc's best Q1 lap, by contrast, was nearly 0.4 quicker. That delta isn't about driver execution, it's about car functionality. Leclerc had a properly mapped floor, a fully calibrated suspension, and full FP3 data. Hamilton had none of that. His lap was a survival attempt, not a performance statement. The timing sheet masked how compromised his machine really was. Ferrari also highlighted tire behavior as a red flag. Hamilton's rear temperatures spiked significantly higher than expected on both runs. With no FP3 running, the team had no updated surface temperature models or wear curves. The rebuilt suspension was not optimized to control lateral loads, and the result was uneven stress across the tire. That created micro-overheating zones on the rear left, which destroyed exit grip through turn 19. Engineers noted excessive tread movement in that section, evidence of a rear end that simply wasn't planted. Brake traces further confirmed the imbalance. Hamilton was forced to brake earlier than ideal in sectors 1 and 2, compensating for rear instability. His brake pressure trace showed more abrupt applications and earlier liftoffs compared to his standard profile. In plain terms, he didn't trust the car under deceleration. That lack of confidence is deadly in qualifying, especially in a field where hundredths separate midfield from elimination. The car may have been back on track, but the control system's aero tools and predictability were gone. What stung even more was the comparison with drivers in less competitive machinery. Yuki Tsunoda in the RB, Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber, and even Hülkenberg in the Haas all outqualified Hamilton with cleaner, more predictable laps. Their cars might not be faster on paper, but they were stable and fully understood by their teams. Hamilton, in contrast, was driving a Ferrari that had become a patchwork experiment. And with no data, no rhythm, and no margin for error, even a 7-time world champion couldn't save it. Ferrari's report made one thing brutally clear. Once Hamilton's SF25 hit the barriers in FP3, the car he drove in qualifying was no longer the same machine. The replacement floor was not just a backup part, it was an uncalibrated component. In modern Formula One, the floor is the aerodynamic foundation. It generates the majority of downforce through controlled ground effect airflow. When that part is replaced without proper chassis remapping, the rest of the car becomes unpredictable, especially in how it handles cornering loads, braking stability, and ride height sensitivity. The original floor had been tuned throughout the weekend with real-world data from practice. It was perfectly aligned with the car's rake angle, suspension stiffness, and underbody airflow management. But once Ferrari installed the new floor, they had no opportunity to recalibrate those relationships. That's what engineers refer to as aeromechanical decoupling, where the aerodynamic surfaces are no longer in sync with the suspension geometry. The result? Hamilton's car couldn't maintain consistent balance across the lap, reacting differently to identical inputs in successive corners. On top of that, Ferrari had to change both front and rear suspension arms after the crash, particularly the toe link and pushrod systems. Those components dictate tire camber and how weight is transferred during acceleration and braking. Normally, suspension tuning is refined over several sessions using telemetry feedback. In Hamilton's case, there was no opportunity for such optimization. The rebuild geometry wasn't properly aligned with the replacement floor, meaning the car's mechanical grip and tire contact patch were compromised before it even hit the track. This mismatch between mechanical and aero setups caused severe instability during weight transfer. At tracks like Yas Marina, this is fatal. The circuit demands high-speed direction changes followed by heavy braking, just the kind of load cases that reveal flaws in suspension and floor integration. Ferrari's post-session telemetry confirmed what the onboard already showed: rear instability under braking, sudden mid-corner balance shifts, and poor traction on exits. These are not signs of driver error. They are mechanical and aerodynamic dissonance, plain and simple. To make matters worse, Hamilton had no updated setup tools available. Brake balance, differential settings, and energy deployment maps are usually tweaked based on FP3 data. That data simply didn't exist for his car. Engineers had to rely on Leclerc's numbers, but with Hamilton's car using a completely different floor and compromised geometry, those references were invalid. Brake temperatures ran higher than expected, deployment was inefficient, and the throttle map wasn't tuned to manage the car's new weight distribution. Everything was off by a margin too small to notice, but too large to ignore. Even the tire models didn't fit. Hamilton's rear degradation curve didn't match the expected delta over a push lap. Ferrari expected a gradual warm-up followed by peak grip through Sector 2, but instead, the rears overheated early due to sliding and couldn't recover. This happened because the floor's aero seal was breaking under load, letting turbulent air disrupt the underbody pressure. In a ground effect car, that kills downforce generation and makes the rear tires work twice as hard. That's exactly what the temperature trace showed. By the time Hamilton started his second qualifying run, the car was in survival mode. Ferrari engineers later admitted they couldn't even confirm whether the backup floor had been producing consistent downforce across the lap. That means Hamilton was driving a car with variable performance, sometimes responsive, sometimes completely detached. And in a qualifying session, where every tenth of a second matters, that variability turned into elimination. The rebuild didn't just fail to restore performance, it broke the fundamental balance that makes a Formula One car work.